All right, we will begin the October 28th Ways and Means Committee meeting. Jamie, we're on. We're good? All right. So welcome everyone to the committee meeting. We'll get everyone started here. Mr. Fennell, if you're ready. Jim? I know Jim's hard at it. All right. So we do not have anyone calling in. I think Ms. Relaford will be showing up any minute, so we do not need to approve having anyone calling in on the phone. So the first item is the approval of minutes of August 26, 2020. So I need a motion. Phil and Junior second. So any comments, input, adjustments to the minutes from last August meeting? Seeing none. All in favor of approving the minutes with the sign of aye? Aye. Those opposed with the sign of nay? All right, passes unanimously. We will start into the informational items. As our normal process, we have several of these. So the auditor's report is in. The auditor is out today, so she does have the report in the packet of the checks and the expenditures that was audited in the past month. So give everyone a chance to take a quick look at that to see if there's any questions. And if we do, we can record those and come back to her with an ask. Otherwise, we will file that as a document. So we'll move on to the next, county clerk's office. I see our clerk is over here. She's filed a report. She has her collections and transactions report. Looks pretty consistent. Looks like we've got a fair amount of business going on in the clerk's office. I don't know, Rachel, do you have any additional comments you'd like to share? No? I mean, you're, okay. So again, looks like we're on par with being with the revenues and the transactions. So thank you for that report. We'll move to the next one, County Election Commission, Mr. Bride. I'm sure you're not busy nowadays, so you probably got time to give us a report.
Yeah, we're busy. Just to give you an idea how busy we are. As of last night, 43,473 people have voted in Peoria County. We're almost at 36% turnout. Not quite a week before the election. We've mailed out about 35,000 vote-by-mail applications. We've got about almost 80% of those back. Vote-by-mail ballots have come back, either back or they've been surrendered. We've had probably 1,700 surrendered too. So right now, even with the record turnout, we're anticipating election day to be much lighter than a typical presidential election day, even more around an off-year election with less than 40,000 people. I'll give you an idea. Typically, it's 50 to 55,000 on a presidential election day. So we're probably looking at cutting that number down dramatically, and that's with still a record type of turnout beyond what we've seen in 2008. So we have lines. We've pretty much been way ahead of anywhere we were in early voting since 2008. At every location we've been at, that was the last time we had really big early voting numbers, and we're at least to those points now in most of the locations we're at. We've had a steady line at our office pretty much for 40 days since we started. There has been some lower points, but the line never seems to go away now. Anybody got a question? Yes.
Question?
What is the average wait time at your office, would you say?
It's less than a half an hour. It's probably 20 to 25 minutes most of the time. We'll get some peaks that'll go up. We'll also get some times where it's less than that. I think it's a little longer at some of the outlying locations, but that's probably what I guess.
Hey, Tom? Tom? Hey, Tom? Mr. Bride? Could you use the microphone for those people on the video? Thank you. Is it turned on? Make sure it's...
Is that on now?
Yes, great, thank you.
There have been lines. I think they move relatively quickly. I think they're a little longer at some of the outlying locations. But my response to the people that are intimidated by the line is, if you didn't want to stand in line, you voting 2 or 3 weeks too late at this point, or you should have voted by mail and just pulled in and dropped it off. There's nothing we could do about it at this point. We're going to have lines. So. Yeah, there's kind of an unofficial national standard that a half an hour is acceptable. So that typically is election day. It's not quite as strict on early voting because you do have other opportunities when you're early voting. So,
Tom, just for the benefit of our viewing audience, could you review the numbers again of the early vote and the vote by mail? And I know, apologize, you're getting that data back in front of you, but
sure, that's fine. As of the end of voting yesterday, we had 43,473 people had voted in Peoria County, which is just under 36% of the registered voters. And almost 80% of the vote by mail ballots that have been sent out had been returned. We sent out just under 35,000. The most we'd ever sent out before was 10,000. We have over almost 26,000 of them back. So, and then a number of surrendered ballots that people had changed their mind and surrendered to vote in person.
okay. Any other questions from committee members? Mr. Bride, could you give us an update on a grant potential here from the state, and just as an informational, and we'll discuss it here?
Sure. We at the end of September, we were notified of the possibility of a grant from the Center for Tech and Civic Life. We applied for the grant. It was awarded to Peoria County Election Commission in the amount of $109,544. The Peoria Board of Election Commissioners at their October 13th meeting approved the acceptance of the grant. This is a broad-based grant from this organization that really doesn't have any strings on it. I've communicated a couple times, but as long as it's an election-related expense, it's not really limited in what we can spend it on. We do have a couple grants that we're getting from the state. One is the CARES Act grant, and another one is postage. The postage is limited to postage out and back related to this election, and the CARES Act has to be, there are some limitations on how that money can be spent. This money, this grant has almost no strings to it other than a reporting mechanism by the end of the year. So it was an interesting process to apply. I'm not kidding. It was a online application that was probably about as long as it takes you to sign up for iTunes. Other than a certification from the county that we're a government entity, it wasn't very hard at all. And I was surprised at the amount that we got back. I was expecting a much smaller number. So it's nice to know that we have that we have this pool of money that we can dip into to help support the elections, and especially in Peoria County in the situation we're in financially. It was nice to get money, and really there's reporting mechanisms, but there's not a lot of strings to the grant.
Any questions from any of the committee members? Sharon?
What was the name of the organization again?
It's the Center for Tech and Civic Life. It's Zuckerberg. He wrote a check for $250 million, then I think added another $100 million on it, and they want to spend it on this election. So, I mean, that's my understanding is that's where the money's coming from. He set up an organization to disperse it.
So, Mr. Chairman, if it's yours and the committee's pleasure, if there's no objection, Tom actually has an agenda briefing and a resolution that was submitted too late to get it on the agenda for today as an action item, but you can either poll vote this, or you can call a special meeting of the committee before the November 12th County Board meeting to move it on to the November County Board agenda. Your choice. Know full well, though, that I think Mr. Dillon is planning a Rules Committee meeting at 5 p.m. on the 12th.
Okay. All right, thank you. I guess since you have the resolution material ready, this is informational today because we're not able to vote. We didn't post it in time. But I'd ask any of the committee members, would you have a concern if we put this out as a poll vote? You'll get it in an email with all the resolution in detail. Informally, you can make sure you get your questions answered as what little you have awareness today as an informational. And then if you have questions on the poll vote, you can come back to Mr. Bride and get those clarified. Is that acceptable as a way, as opposed to holding up a separate meeting just to vote on this? Mr. Fennell?
I'd like, if we could have, and maybe in that poll vote, an idea of where the funds are going to be spent.
Okay, good statement. Junior, you okay with poll vote? Bill? Okay, so I'll recommend that we do that, Tom, so if you'd prepare that and get that out in the next week here, we should be able to process that and have it done for the November board meeting
Sure.
for official approval. Okay. Anything, Phil?
How long do you have on this grant?
The expenditures have to be related to the November 2020 election, and we have till the end of the year to do the reporting on it.
Just the end of this year?
The end of this year, yes. It was, it was very last minute, and there, which makes it a little more complicated.
Right. So a good chunk of the grant dollars will, partially reimburse us for the budget cuts that you reinstated at your June county board meeting. And then there will be some other expenses that Tom has incurred during this election cycle that will be applicable to those expenditures.
Phil, did you get your question answered? Okay. Anyone?
Pretty
Yep,
restrictive.
it is, yes.
Can any of it be used towards the expenses of the maintenance of your polling equipment and stuff that you've had to incur?
There isn't, on this specific grant, there really isn't much of a limitation other that it has to be spent on this election. And honestly, the guidance we've got from them is we trust your decision-making on this process. So it can pretty much be used for anything. One of the issues, though, with this grant is that when you find out, I mean, we were basically voting by the time we found this out. So most of what we were looking at for expenditures, we'd lined up and had already in. It's hard to go out and spend that kind of money at the last minute when you've already kind of geared up. We had most of the PPE we had, we'd already reached out and got equipment to help, expanded some of our equipment and systems to help this election. And had been looking at our limitations at the state grants that we were getting, the CARES Act and the postage. So this is really on top of that. So we're trying to identify some other expenditures. Some of these are going to be expenditures we would have made anyway, but we're going to identify with this grant. Definitely, probably the majority of them are going to be expenditures we would have had anyway.
I was just thinking of something that, your mailing and some of your PPE and all that kind of stuff, that's going to be covered under those other grants. So I was thinking of either the maintenance things that you had to do for this year, or maybe post election maintenance that you're going to have to do that could be part of this year's cost that this could go towards or something.
Yeah, one of the things that we're definitely going to do is we're going to resupply most of our just usable items, the ballot paper, the envelopes, all that stuff. We're intending to make sure that we resupply pretty much anything we use for this election and maybe a little bit beyond, so that we've got, really, we're talking about using down the road, but we used up some on this election, so we're planning on replacing that. Those kind of, our hope, at least at my point, my hope is and I haven't had a tremendous amount of time to do planning on some of this for obvious reasons, but some of my hope is to use this money to offset expenditures we would have had to help our budget going forward.
Thank you.
I'm really looking at this almost as found money, which to some extent it is.
Bill?
But none of this can be used for this city election coming up.
It cannot be a direct expense related to that, but I think we can pay for this, the disposables we used for this election. Right.
I mean, you got a quick turnover.
Yes.
Can you use it for poll workers and your poll employer?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so that's a good expense to apply to it. All right. My thought is if we get this thing approved and into the November board for approval, then Tom has time to work the details and fill out the paperwork on the backside with the expenses that he needs in order to qualify to receive these funds. Is that a fair?
It is, and the other grants, and they're somewhat interrelated on what we're going to use them for. The other grants, the reporting on that from the state is November 20th. So we've got a quicker deadline there to try to make sure that, my goal is to use up the grant money that we can and just trying to find what goes under what grant. And I'm going to have to sit down and do some of that relatively quickly after the election. I mean, we've been tracking a lot of it, and a lot of it's been expended, but we've got to now kind of figure out which line item it goes in, or which grant the expenditures go under. And I don't want to leave money on the table.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Any other questions from any of the committee members? All right. So we'll look forward to a resolution, Tom, for the board, the committee, to do a poll vote. So you can get that through Jan and get that out to us. That'd be great.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else from the election?
No, that's all we've got at the moment.
Okay. Thank you for the update. We will move now to Mr. Bruner in Finance.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are, on a side note, working very hard to wrap up the budget. We'll have a little update from Mr. Fiddle's committee. Just want to let you know, all of you should have on or in front of you, something that Chairman Ricker asked me to prepare regarding an item that came up on the audit this year. During the course of the audit, the external auditors noted that we had a control deficiency in regards to our P-card usage. Specifically, that some departments had only one signature on the P-card form, which is generated by MB when we submit it. The form has a place for both a submitter and an approver. The issue was that a few departments, due to limited staff, had the same person signing in both spots. We had discussions between Chairman Ricker, Scott, the county auditor, Ms. Thomas, Brian Lefebvre, who was sickage, and myself, and the external auditors indicated that that the finding would go away as long as we have another employee in the department sign this form. It doesn't matter if they're a superior or a report to the person submitting it, so that should make this go away for next year. I'm happy to try and answer any question.
Okay. I know this is a topic we've had for a couple months now, but wanted to get this cleaned up, and I'll ask any of the committee members if you have any questions or concerns about the finding and the recommendation.
Real exciting accounting stuff.
Mr. Fennell?
Is there any way that we have any thing that the people who are signing as a secondary sign off, they understand the responsibility? It's not just signing off, that they're validating an expense and it's not to be taken lightly. Is there anything in our...
I would think, I don't want to speak for Chairman Ricker, but I would think you wouldn't sign anything lightly. You would assume, it pretty much states that I submitted one of the ones that I have, I certify, and you're certifying that these are appropriate expenses. Now, I guess, if there's ever a discussion whether there was a expense that should be on a P card,
Well,
so that's what the Ways and Means Committee would be for.
I guess it's pretty well, kind of spelled out as that first sentence of it, that
Yes.
yes. So I guess I would retract what I said, because I've examined the charges of Peoria County purchasing card, and expenditures are approved by. So I think that's pretty well does. Thank you.
Kim with the finance department is trying to work with IMB, because the wording where it says, it's signed by the employee, then the next it's I certify. I'd like that I to be part of the third sentence, but this is a CAN report, and that's like a third-party provider who does this, so we're trying to get this so it just flows a little better.
I guess one of the questions I'd ask in your recommendation, and I'll come back to you, Sharon, in a second, but in the recommendation it says, if another person in the office signs the certification form, should we say another employee? I don't know if we have
Yeah,
contract
I'm
workers.
sorry. Yeah, that would, yeah.
That'd be clear, right, as opposed to a contract agency person versus an official employee.
Yeah.
Okay. Sharon?
I was going to ask virtually kind of the same thing here. It says if another person in the office signs the purchasing card transaction certification form. So in some cases, will that be a subordinate?
Yes.
I'm not comfortable with that.
Okay. That's a fair statement, and we've had that discussion about, should it be a subordinate under the person who's applying or filling out the expense sheet? Any of the other committee members have a feeling on that, or a preference? I mean, we did go to Sickage on that topic, and they were okay with it allowing the subordinate. So I personally backed off of it, but I was one that was opposed to the subordinate to begin with. But since our outside auditor agreed to it, I backed away. But any other committee members have a question around that or thoughts?
I would just concur that was my same process, that I was kind of against it, but when they said that they would approve it, then I backed away, so.
Rachel?
I remember when we first discussed it, had the same concern, so I was then surprised to hear that from an auditing standpoint that they were okay having a subordinate do it. Because on face value, I would agree. I think about it, any type of business, having a subordinate sign puts that individual kind of in a tough spot if they are in a disagreement or had questions about it, to question we call a one-up, or the person who's,
The superior over them?
superior over them.
Yeah.
What would be the alternative if we didn't go that route? Have we talked about who that could be if we didn't?
Well, we have discussed it could be another elected, because the scenario we have is if the elected official is the one filling out the P card for an expense that they incurred, they have nobody over them as a superior because they are elected by the public. So then we would have to move it to a person in another department outside of that elected's department. So at that point, anybody, quite frankly, outside of that elected's department who's not a subordinate could qualify as an employee. So it could be anybody in the county, or we could stipulate it needs to be some level of management or an equal to the person who's submitting, and another elected official or a management employee. So those would be other options that we could stipulate around it. So again, those were things that we thought about.
Or the other way to go, because it was brought up, I don't know if you'd be interfering with the statutory authority of an elected official if you had another elected official approving their P card. So the question would be, or the workaround would be, you have somebody below them with the P card, take it out of the department head or elected's hands, and then, so that would be the elected would be the approver, like the chief deputy or someone else.
Yeah. In this situation, we didn't have a chief deputy in the example we were working with, so that was and I think some of the other electeds use that parameter. The chief deputy is the one that uses the P card, and then the elected, being a superior over them, approves it. So you've got two levels. Phil?
The only particular department, other than the department that has to have it signed, that I would probably prefer would be the state's attorney, because they know the legality of this whole situation. And I would think that they, more than anybody else, would be the one that I would want directed to sign off on these P cards.
Okay, that's a suggestion. I hadn't thought of that direction, so I don't know if our representative of the state's attorney's office has any comments on that off the top from knowledge.
I guess I would say, to whoever's point it was about then you're overlapping elected officials' duties. I mean, is Jody who's going to feel comfortable signing off on, the auditor's P card without not knowing anything about the expenditure? So I think I understand why the state's attorney's office seems like a good choice, but I think anytime you're going to cross into different offices, no matter what office that is, I think that would cause some problems. I mean, if anything, like the finance department might be a better fit than the state's attorneys if you're going to cross departments. But I don't know. I think I'm guessing that the elected officials are not going to want to do that option. So I think that we'd have to, if the board or the committee had a suggestion, then I think that'd have to be worked out among the departments or electeds that are being proposed to actually execute that. I'm just guessing that is probably not something they're going to want to take on.
Okay, thank you. Phil?
I'm not necessarily saying that we should designate them, but if we had to go to another department, I was saying this. I think it can stay within the department, and that person has to sign off, even though they are subordinate. They know what the responsibility is, and it says right there, I have certified. If you falsely certify that, then you're guilty.
Yep. Yeah, so again, I was pretty strong saying it couldn't be a subordinate, but after our outside auditor came back and said that it is acceptable to have a subordinate, have to take their judgment from an auditing standpoint, and the fact that that person as an employee, and I think we need to clarify it's an employee, not just a person, is accountable to the county as an employee to not falsify, so I'm okay with it. I mean, the other option that we did look at and that some other counties use is they bring it to the committee. So in those situations where that elected has to have a P card signed, they would have to present it to a committee in a session like this, and then we would vote every month on their P cards. I don't think we need to go quite that far with it. So I've been through this quite a bit. I guess I'm okay with leaving it where it is, but again, I'm only one voice, so we're trying to make sure we're doing the right thing for the county. Rachel?
I would defer to our the experts on this, and even though personally, again, initially I had some concern and reservation about it, if their direction is that it's permissible and that it would be within their guidelines, I would go ahead and support it then.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fennell?
Yeah, I don't know if you have the information, but I was just curious of how many of these a month we would actually have by that supervisor of those.
That I don't have any data on.
Kim says 3.
3 a month? Okay.
I mean, that's not how many P cards, but that's how many would be where there'd be
So
somebody
36
below
to
them.
50.
Somebody below them signing for someone above them.
As an example, I fall in that same boat. Although I have Shauna, Randy, or Julie's authorized to be the approver on my P card statement after I've reviewed it and am ready to submit it. Because obviously, everybody that works for the county board through the county administrator's office is a subordinate to me.
Correct. Yeah, so it is another real example of how it's been functioning today. Other questions or concerns? I know it's not an easy one, but again, I'm okay. We change the word to employee and we move forward and make sure it's clear communication throughout I don't know where this finding gets documented, so it's in a policy guide, I'd assume, right, Randy, as moving forward?
It's in the auditor's communication of the county board of management.
Yep. Okay, I just wanted, so for future, people know where to find that policy. Okay.
On our website, under
All
the
right.
finance department.
Sharon?
So this is just for discussion. Are we going to have an action item on this, or is this, because I'm still not comfortable with this. If we're going to have an action item, I'm going to vote against it. But I'm just
Okay.
wondering if that's what's going
Well,
to happen.
And I'm open to it. We originally planned on it being an informational, which is typically when we do the auditor's report from the annual audit, we provide the findings and the responses as an informational. But I'm good with making it, bringing it back to the board next month as a action item and let us take an official action. So I'm not opposed to that concept, and I don't think we have a burning deadline that we have to have this done by the end of the month. So we just need to come back and review how to improve. So I'm hearing enough voices, I think, of some concern. Are we okay with reviewing this again and bringing it back as an official action to vote on, so we get an official approval as opposed to informational? Okay, so we'll take that action, Randy. Next month we'll come back with it. You've heard some of the concerns about the positioning. Let's look at some other options. May get a hold of Sickage, our outside auditor, and review with them again the concern that we're having and see if they have other recommendations.
You can do that.
All right. Anything else from the finance office? All right. Well, thank you, Randy. Now we'll move to some more fun, exciting things with my new neighbor, Beth, from the Regional Office of Education.
Yeah, hi neighbor.
I had to share, I driving through the neighborhood the other day, and somebody moved into the house down the street from me, and there she was with her dog out in the yard. So welcome.
You're my new county board member. So
Yeah.
before I start into my report, I want to be perfectly clear that my more than $9 million budget on the other side of my operations is audited every year by the Office of Auditor General. And the OAG, I call it our annual office colonoscopy. And it is quite thorough and quite extensive. And I sign my own expense reports, and I do sign. So the process that you're discussing is okay with the Office of Auditor General. There is no one that supervises me, and so we will continue to have that practice on that side of our operations, whatever that is decided here. So I just wanted to bring that to everyone's attention, because that is quite the, that just got wrapped up, and we're still a month of filling out and sending in more things to them. Okay, very quickly, let's see here. Peoria Regional Learning Center, the high school you support out at Wildlife Prairie. Our 9-week grading period just ended, and folks, remote learning is more difficult than you could ever imagine. If you have a teacher or a family member or parent that you know in your life, you need to lift them up and support them. The data came back that wasn't great, and so we moved back to full in-person learning with as much mitigation as possible starting this week. And when they came back, I've never seen such excited, well-behaved, so glad to see one another. It's funny how things become so much more desirable than when you can't have it, right? So we're very excited about that, having some pretty good success. Many of you have gotten to know Trudy, who is our new homeless liaison and truancy director. She took over for Oliver, who retired. If you didn't know, her father passed away this week, and he was the mayor of Delavan in his lifetime. So just wanted to bring that to your attention. The Illinois Virtual School, which is what we run out of our office as part of the other side of our operations, over the summer we saw more than 150% increase in enrollments, and we're seeing a 75% increase in enrollments this fall because of remote and online learning. Schools are asking us to be their solution for remote learning, and that has proven to be both good and challenging, but I wanted to bring that to your attention. If you are a card person or sending out notes to those who excel, Peoria Public Schools announced their award winners, and I got to be on a conference Zoom with leadership from the state of Illinois, as our own Ms. Page, who teaches at Thomas Jefferson, is the area award winner and finalist for Teacher of the Year. So we sent her something. If you want to send her a note, she is an exciting, outstanding teacher and was not selected for Teacher of the Year, but she still does great things. Mr. Bloomer at Lincoln was the principal. June Smothers was the assistant principal of the year. And you might know the athletic director, Mr. Brian Dumpy, was the support person of the year. And so
Awesome.
he will get his own private thank you. So right now we are, as we speak, undergoing an accreditation review. I am trying to analyze our office and look for gaps in service and what we provide and for things that we need to do better. And so that is an accreditation review. I will let you know the results of that. It concludes this week. Thank you to Mr. Jimmy Dillon. If you are listening, he was on that call as a representative of the county board to just give input. I was not on any of those calls. I'd be really curious what everyone had to say, and will help our office to be better. And I will conclude with some exciting news of some grant opportunities that we've received at the Regional Office of Education. We received approximately $64,000 in a digital equity grant. We're very excited about that. It's going to help us completely retrofit Peoria Regional Learning Center for better online remote learning with devices and other technology to support them. We have applied for and are pretty sure we're going to get a digital professional learning grant where we're hoping to embrace a platform to deliver more online professional learning. That will be over $40,000. And then we're excited, this has not rolled out yet, and hopefully we'll hit the news here pretty soon. We just signed an intergovernmental agreement with the Illinois State Board of Education to deliver trauma training, social and emotional learning, and other things to support mental health with a subcontractor of Lurie's Hospital and Rush Hospital. And that will be coming very soon. We just finalized all of that here yesterday, and we're very excited because nothing could be needed more right now. It's challenging out there, and I'm sure you all have your own stories from the kids and teenagers in your lives.
Yep. No, great. Thank you for the updates, and we know education. I'm a big fan and advocate of education, and you've got some really challenging times right now with education and trying to get these youngsters to learn remote learning. We'll learn a lot from remote learning, but I don't think it's the ultimate solution at this point. We haven't adapted. Any questions from any of the committee members on?
Can I give one quick shout out though to Monica, because her partnership with the local school districts has been beyond compare if you know what goes on in other counties. So we started off with one model, and I absolutely detest the phrase now, we're building the plane as we fly it, but it's true. And we started out with one model of contact tracing because if Phil comes to school sick and then he gets a positive diagnosis, who's all sitting around him? So we've had to build out seating charts, and we keep them all in Google files so that we can act on those at night and the weekends, because everyone that sits around Phil has to be quarantined. So put that on the scale of Peoria Public Schools, Dunlap, any school, is you've got kids on quarantine, then the positive kids are isolated, and the health department is a partner, and who does the contact tracing? So we made a pivot this week, and we're looking at shifting some resources to the school districts so they can enter that information into the Salesforce platform that the health department uses. Just looking at some new ways to speed up the process, because you're talking about thousands of kids in Peoria County now that have gone through quarantine or isolation or both. And if you don't know this, if Phil goes home, we have to contact all of his brothers and sisters as well and send them home immediately. So that process is also cumbersome. And so it's taking a lot of time and energy and resources to keep kids safe and keep them well.
Oh, thanks for the additional update, because I talked to Monica earlier today, and she gave me some of the same background, and just amazed at the amount of work in the background to do that tracing and connecting and the delays that are involved. So thanks for that update on it. Any questions for our Regional Office of Education? Phil?
Going to comment. Unfortunately, don't let me, be subject to a positive test because I'm 81 and I got 9 stents in me, so I would be the prime candidate for the devil. And I will speak for many of the retired teachers that I know. there's much admiration among retired teachers and all of you who may still have some children in school and so forth. You need to thank those teachers in any way you want to, because as I said at one of our meetings, and I had some big time people immediately say they were with me all the way. I says, guys, I couldn't teach in this situation. They are under terrific conditions that are not good for education. But these people are making the most of it. And the school boards, I hope they realize what these teachers are really doing, because they're endangering their health. Absolutely. But the circumstances that they've been put under, you know, they're more grave than I've ever seen, that I ever had to go in and teach under. So there's a lot of respect out there among retired teachers. I'm talking about people from ICC all the way down to kindergarten who I knew taught here in District 150. So whether you can relay that message,
Yep.
by communicating with those people, we really do respect them.
Well, thank you, Phil. I certainly will. And I'm always the example of the positive case when Monica's on a Zoom call, so you'll always be my example of the positive case when I'm here, because you're like kryptonite.
No, thank you, Phil, for that, recognizing and respecting the teachers in our community at all levels, because they are doing a wonderful job at managing through this, and the administrators and everybody else in the education system. So it's not easy. So kudos to them and much respect. We'll move on to Mr. Dave Ryan, Supervisor of Assessments, Board of Review. Welcome, Dave.
Hi, I just got a short update this week. Since the last time we had met, we have gone through, we've completed the 2020 assessments. Now they're at the review level, so we're looking at, we probably have close to 800 complaints, which is typical for non-reassessment years. The only difference we're seeing this year as opposed to other years, all other years I've looked at, is we almost have as many commercial complaints as we do residential complaints. So there is a higher number of commercial complaints, which we kind of anticipated. A couple of the large complaints we have coming in will be Keystone and the Edwards plant are a couple of two that come to mind that are fairly large reductions that they're requesting. So we will be looking at those. This is the time that school districts will be calling and getting their EAV estimates. So I'm doing EAV estimates for all the school districts and different taxing bodies that call to request that. And on the legislative front, what we did this year, and it was passed into legislation regarding not having the seniors, disabled persons, and disabled veterans refile for 2020. That legislation was passed, but that was only passed for the year 2020. So we're looking to possibly expand that into the veto session to do that for 2021. It is a May, you don't have to do it. But it is something that we're looking to have the option, not knowing what this winter will be like. So that will be done in the veto session. We're looking to bring that forward sometime in, I believe the veto session is November and the first part of December. So we will look to bring that forward. So if anybody's got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay. Any questions for Mr. Ryan? All right. Thank you,
Good,
Dave.
thank you.
Appreciate the update on that. We will move on to the treasurer, Ms. Nicole Bjerke. You're on stage.
There's probably 2 times in the whole year that I'm like one of the most hated elected officials. First is when I send out tax bills, and the second one is when I send out delinquent notices. We sent them out. There were 5,002 delinquent notices that we sent out, which is less than last year. So that's good. So far, even, I sent out the first delinquent list to our tax buyers, and we were at 4,091. So we've already gotten a lot of payments from people getting their delinquent notices. This week, there was publications in the newspaper, so for the next couple of weeks, we'll be very busy taking in payments and getting people paid so they don't go to our tax sale November 9th. So the last day to make a payment is November 6th. By 5 o'clock, it physically has to be in our office by that date.
Okay, so for anyone who's watching and you're still delinquent on taxes, you got until November 6th to get your taxes, property taxes paid in. Otherwise, we go to tax sale on November 9th. And so, again, thank you, Nicole, for working that. I know it's not a thankful job. Nobody comes back and thanks you for putting their house up on the delinquent tax list.
No.
But it's a job that we ask you to do and the public has asked you to do, so appreciate that. We'll let you continue on.
Okay, the other thing was the trustee auction. Last month, the ABW properties were deferred at the county board meeting. And I provided a list of the ABW properties to Steve today. I did notice that some of those are on the delinquent monthly listing this month. They were not on last month's. So there
Okay.
is a little bit of a crossover regarding the list that I just gave you and what is there today. But the ones that were deferred last year or last month will be put on for the county board meeting this coming month.
Okay, just to add some more color around that or clarity. So last month, we did not have a committee meeting. We did a poll vote through committee, and we agreed through poll vote to put these properties that were bid on up for approval to transfer deed to the bidder. After that occurred, we did get a request from the city of Peoria asking us to consider holding off on some of these properties, specifically one bidder. They had a bid well over 48 to 50 some properties or parcels. So decision was made in the September board meeting. No, it's the October board meeting, earlier this month. The October board meeting to pull those from the approval list and to hold them so we could meet with the city. So we did have a meeting last week. Nicole, Scott, Jenny from legal side, along with Mr. Yerk from the city, and we did meet. We went through discussions of what are opportunities and what are some of the challenges of pulling and holding these properties and not selling them to the highest bidder. Openly, we have the authority and right to withhold sale. So you should have this list for those who are sitting on your table. You do have the list in front of you of the properties. So we do officially have the right, but after discussion, when you withhold sale, then you have to decide who's going to hold these properties. Is it the trustee? Are we transferring it to other owners? The decision came away from that meeting was we will go forward and put these properties back out on the November full board meeting and put them out for approval. The second piece of that was we've agreed between the county and the city of Peoria to work together to improve the process of these properties coming through the tax delinquency process. Just being transparent, the city had a very valid concern was these properties will cycle through and there's a potential some of these could come back through another in 3-4 years, come back through the same cycle again. And nobody's taking care of the properties. In the meanwhile, they're eroding the value of the city in the areas that they're in. So we want to see if we can find a way to improve the outcome for the residents where these homes are at. Most of them are in the south part of the city. There's a lot of them in one concentrated area, like Lincoln Avenue and some of those streets. So we will work together. The city and the county has agreed to work through to see what processes we can improve on to try to get these properties coming through tax sale back onto, or through the trustee sale, get them back into owners' hands who would want to invest, improve the value, and improve the value in our community and the city. It's an easy thing to say, but it's not an easy thing to do. There's a lot of state statutes and regulations we need to comply with. So from that, we will have a committee. We have not put that together yet as to who from the county and who from the city will sit down and start working through that. The goal would be to have some improvement in place before next August sale, and it may take longer term, but so that's one of the positive outcomes, is to work through that, try to find an improvement in the process. With that, I'm going to pause and ask if any of the committee members have any questions on this topic. Okay, Mr. Chairman Rand?
Remind me how you can obligate the county to work on a process as a member of the body.
How I can obligate the county?
Mm-hmm.
I guess it's a board decision, ultimately, correct? If we want to
Well,
work on a process?
now you're speaking a language that I understand.
Okay. So I guess the direction here would be to bring this to the full board or to a board level for discussion as to how the board wants to proceed with this topic?
Well, I don't know if you read the board rules often enough, but generally these intergovernmental or legislative issues are the subject of the executive committee of which you're a member. I don't really know that it's right to take a process that's established in our ordinance regarding delinquent sales, hold up the sale of 48 properties as you did, and then now we have to go back, and I guess we're going to decide whether we want to sell them again now because you've made that decision.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just telling you, Mr. Ricker, I don't think that's the process. You remind me of process all the time, and since you've not discussed this with me once, twice, or ever, I'm curious as to how legally we move forward if you're going to command the ship in this discussion of a process that, I don't know, has gone on for quite a while, and that's the sale of delinquent taxes. So this is kind of like a polite caution to say maybe we really ought to have a meeting of the minds here, maybe go into executive session to do it, but I'm not sure the path you're on is one that you've been chosen to do.
Okay, valid point. I'll bring it to the executive committee and to you, and we'll seek guidance on how to proceed forward.
Thank you.
All right. Thanks for the guidance and leadership. Appreciate that. Other comments, questions from the committee? All right. Thank you, Nicole, for your update. Mr. Brooks was not able to be with us today for the Veterans Assistance Commission update, so I don't have anything for his portion of it. So we'll move into the resolution. So in your packet, you had the monthly delinquent taxes for this month. It's a shorter list, and so I need a motion to put it on the floor. Okay, Rachel first and Mr. Fennell second. Any questions on the list today? Okay, not seeing any questions. I'll put it up for vote. All in favor of approval with the sign of aye.
Aye.
Those opposed with the sign of nay. Okay, it passes unanimously. So now we are in the miscellaneous section. Anybody for miscellaneous? Mr. Fennell.
Yes, every month we go through with the Veterans Assistant Commission not being available because of walk-in Wednesday or whatever. I would like to see us reach out to them and have them give a report, a written report to us so that we have something monthly. This going on every month and not having anything is not right. If they can't be here, they should submit some kind of a written report to us.
Okay, no, good point, good recommendation. We'll make that to Mr. Brooks. Any other miscellaneous?
Yes,
Mr. Chairman?
Mr. Sorrell, walk-in Wednesdays have been part of VAC for a long time, no?
For quite some time, yes.
So this is sort of a recent development, right?
I think, you know, over the last year or so, maybe year and a half, Mr. Brooks's attendance has been very spotty, I think would be maybe a good way to say it, based on walk-in Wednesdays. Now, obviously, because of COVID, they did have some changes to how they do walk-in Wednesdays, and quite honestly, I have not spoken recently to Mr. Brooks to know just exactly how COVID has impacted walk-in Wednesdays. So, I mean, to be honest with the committee, I couldn't tell you today if they're continuing to do them or if they're doing them in a different way than they historically have. And, you know, Mr. Fennell's comments are very, very well taken. The committee has oversight over the commission, and they should be making some type of a report.
Yeah, I think there's perhaps some bridge building that we might need based on what I understand a rift may exist between the manager's budget recommendations and authority and sort of the semi-autonomous duties of the commission. And I so state publicly because I've asked a couple other members to help me with it, and maybe we just need to go over there with wave some flags, because I think it's different than just not showing up, and I wouldn't want Steve to have an expectation that there's not something else going on behind the curtain there.
Just for clarity, Mr. Brooks did send me an email earlier today. It says, I will not be available to attend the meeting today as I am preparing for the virtual Board of Veterans Appeals hearing with a judge for first thing tomorrow morning. So it wasn't walk-in Wednesday as the rationale. It was preparing for this a Board of Veterans Appeals. Again, I think it's fair they have the discussion. He has also acknowledged that he has made the adjustment to the budget, so that's not, at least in his words, not a concern. But I think it's fair we need to have some bridge building and good discussion with Mr. Brooks to make sure we're working together. Mr. Fennell?
Just a point, I think it's really his attendance has really fallen off since the meetings were changed from Tuesday to Wednesday, and that's been 2 years. Once we changed from Tuesday to Wednesday is when he really fell off on his attendance.
Correct. Yeah, and I did discuss it with him when we made that change. But, you know, we had a conflict when that occurred. Phil?
I was just going to comment, he was here last month, and what I was thinking, I don't know how many he employs in that office, but he has sent a representative at different times. I think Trish was the girl that came down and covered for him once in a while. On walk-in Wednesday, do they get that much traffic that somebody could not break away and come to a meeting?
It's a good question. I'll bring that up to him and see if we can get some representation physically here. I think it's good to be here in person. A written report supporting the in-person is welcome. Anything in writing is a good thing. It makes it transparent to the public. It's available for transparency. Junior? All right, but you've got your colors designed well today. The checkers and the leopard going there. I like that. The zebra. No spots, stripes. Okay. I'm having a hard time with vision apparently. Your checkers and your stripes have got me mixed up. All right. Any other miscellaneous? All right. With that, we will adjourn. Thank you. Bailiff, can I move?